Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the QRL Show, the place where you come for the crypto and stay for the quantum. In today's episode, myself and Michael Strike from the QRL team are excited to be joined by Hunter Beast, who is a Rust Bitcoin developer and the author of BIP360, which is pay to quantum resistant hash. And in this conversation today, we're going to be talking all about Bitcoin, post quantum security, and quite a bit more. For those watching, Michael and Hunter have shared some good friendly back and forth over some time on Twitter and X for a bit. So it's nice to finally be able to have Hunter with us on an episode to have a good conversation. And as a starting point, I think it'd be helpful, Hunter, if you could maybe for the first minute or so give our audience a brief background about you. Everyone loves a little origin story, maybe a little on your crypto background, what you got you into the space initially, and then eventually led down the road of authoring BIP360 with a ton in between. So if we could start there, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so I would say that one of the major things that brought me into the field of cryptocurrency in general originally was ETH Denver. So I'm based out of Denver, and there's a very vibrant Web3 and all sorts of stuff, cryptography, cryptocurrency community here, and um, Zuko Wilcox up in Boulder with Zcash. There was, of course, Charles Hoskinson with IOHK and Longmont, and of course, John Poller and Kent and Nuke Dan. They're all these really great people here, and I kind of fell in with a crowd called we were going by Crypto Party back then, and so I've made a lot of really great friends, and um, over time, some of the Crypto Party folks just were like, "Dude, you really need to read the Bitcoin Standard," and I kind of like you know ignored it for a while, but in February of 2021, I decided to just hunker down and take the time to read it. And uh, at that time, I was working on the Filecoin protocol. Uh, they needed a Rust version of Filecoin, and I'd just been hired. And I read that book, and I must have been the most insufferable American to work with and be around, surrounded by all these Canadian shitcoiners, and it was just. I was. It's the only job I was ever fired from, not for performance, but for lack of culture fit. And um, yeah, so regardless, no resentment. It's just, I mean, they were right. They were right. They did make the decision for me. And so anyway, I like to care a lot. I care a lot about pretty much everything I do. But that said, that book, like, it hit me like a bag of bricks at a time when, there were a lot of really heady questions being bandied about in society. And, it really just kind of emphasized, the necessity for having a mission for freedom and preserving that mission. And I think that I, I mean I could disagree, but I mean you're welcome to disagree, but in principle, in general, I think we should be laser focused on the problem that central banks cause with money. And if we could just separate money from state, I think we'd all be in a much better place. So we'd have a lot. It doesn't fix everything, but uh, it definitely makes a lot of these other larger problems that we face in society a lot more tractable.
I'd love to go down the monetary history rabbit hole in Jekyll's Island and the Fed.
Yeah,
Yeah, I come from an
intro.
econ background, and Strike could talk my ear on it for 48 hours. So I think the three of us, we could just do a full episode on that. That'd be fun. But no, that I think Hunter, you bring up a good point with you mentioned the Bitcoin standard. I think a lot of people, when it comes to the origin story, whether we're talking crypto OGs or people that even got in at different points, whether it's 2010, 2015, or whatever it might be. For me, it was, I think it clicked a little earlier, but then when I read, I think it was Nathaniel Popper's Digital Gold, I was like, oh, well, I'm really bought in, to this idea. And I think everyone, it hits a little bit differently. Is there anything else you'd like to more add to that? I know, which led up to BIP 360. If you want to continue there, and then I'll let Michael jump in.
I can definitely give more background on BIP 360, but the other thing I just want to kind of mention and point out and acknowledge for background on all of this is that historically, there's been like kind of like a maxi community in Bitcoin, and well, in somewhat, it's also been a bit of a more recent phenomenon, I will acknowledge. But I dislike monopolistic sort of practices, things that run against merit, that come from a place of zero sum thinking or run contrary to meritocracy. And ultimately, one of the most important meritocracies is the market meritocracy of the marketplace of ideas. And I think we should be able to freely discuss ideas and put forth solutions and even test them in markets. I think that's perfectly fine and valid. The only thing I dislike is sort of like people who affinity scams. Like I don't like affinity scams, and that's just like things that say like it's a better Bitcoin. We're this and that. Like Bitcoin has a process for a governance process that's very clearly defined and has gone through its third revision now. Like we are now in BIP 3. BIP 3 defines the current governance process for making changes to Bitcoin using rough consensus. And eventually, if it's a consensus soft fork, then it needs an activation process, which is defined in BIP 8 and BIP 9. And so we have a process for all this. And so when people come in and they say, like that, this and that, like if they're not following the process, or they're just not or in your case, you're essentially trying a completely different approach and not trying to say you're a better Bitcoin or anything like that. You're trying novel cryptography, and it shouldn't be seen as a threat. It should be seen as maybe an option, maybe a hedge, but I don't. I think it's just like, in my opinion, Bitcoin, I am confident, is anti-fragile technology. It is a civilizational imperative, and for anybody to be like, seeing alternative things, alternative technologies, alternative approaches to cryptocurrency in general as threats to Bitcoin comes from a sort of a strange place of insecurity and zero sum thinking that I just don't agree with.
And Michael, I'll let you piggyback and give both on that, and then an intro.
A lot of great pieces in that intro. Well, I'm not going to try and match it. My name is Michael Strike. I've been a network engineer for over 20 years. Route switch, firewall, process improvement, network operations, network design, Juniper, Cisco, Fortinet. Done a lot of work with large corporations, swapping out redesigning DMZs, things like that. So a lot of TCP/IP and design. That's my classical career.
Could I just mention, it's kind of funny. I once got a Fortinet router or Fortinet like firewall, and like a 54G or something, I think it was, or something like that. It was like a really like it was like a white box, and I had such trouble with the user interface that I eventually bricked it, and then I would need to like telnet in to the like some port with a special cable, and it was such a So much respect for those who can figure those things out.
It was probably an RS-232 port under a DB9 or an RJ45.
It was an RJ45 to USB, yeah.
Okay, or to USB. Okay, RS-232 is the old.
Well, no, RJ45 on the device, but then it was like you needed a cable that could connect an RJ45 to USB to telnet in.
Couple comments on that, but I mean,
yeah.
What was I saying?
You're just a quick intro.
My post-classical career is here on the quantum resistant ledger. We're an altcoin that's been around since 2018. As Hunter mentioned, we have. I agree. I wouldn't call it a replacement or an intended replacement or a drop-in fix that's intended to replace Bitcoin or Ethereum. It's kind of like an insurance policy. I love Bitcoin. I've been mining since I bought a 30 gigahertz miner in 2013. It's like $700. I was living with my friend at the time, and he gave free electricity. So I don't know if he ran the math on that
until he got the electric bill.
Yeah, agreement's an agreement. But essentially, we're here as kind of like a backup plan. We don't want this industry to die, and this is what's the market cap right now?
It's fluctuating. Whether you go 2, 3, 4, whatever. I mean, it's gonna. When we look at this as a timestamp, it's going to be much different over time. So
any risk exposure in that size of market that's non-zero is still a huge number.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way to frame it, because
that's basically it's logical, right?
Yeah. I mean, the pie is enormous, and for us to like bicker and squabble and call each other scammers when we're not it's not helpful. It's reflective of zero-sum thinking.
Yeah, I think one question, or where I'd kind of want to start, which is a little bit around BIP360. I think one beneficial thing is a lot of our audience are kind of like-minded as us and as you, Hunter, in terms of we've already gone down the rabbit hole of crypto many years back, and then we went down this lane of thinking about solutions to this post-quantum thing. I think a good first question to kind of kick us off, and then you start out, Hunter, maybe back and forth with you a little, Strike, as well, is maybe give us a little bit on the latest proposals, discussions, development around BIP360 is kind of a starting point, and we can move from there.
I think we opened with pay to quantum resistant hash, but we moved on to pay to taproot, right?
Yeah. So I was going to point that out, but before I go to that, I want to go into the original pay to quantum resistant hash proposal. It was a lot more comprehensive back then. It tried a novel approach. We wanted to add like an additional field similar to the witness, just like specifically for post-quantum cryptography, so that it could be discounted separately. And that would be an effective block size increase. And I've thought a lot about this, and just from like my observations of some of the changes that have been pushed forward by Core in the past, it made me realize that the cost of deviating from the core mission of Bitcoin as money is a little too much for I think it would essentially come at cost of the mission, right? And so in many ways, I will acknowledge that Core has sort of maybe made a misstep or miscalculation about the arbitrary data issue. It's a very complicated, nuanced issue, and so. But regardless, I think it's better to focus on improving Bitcoin security against nation-state threats of all kinds, in service to the mission of money that challenges their authority to issue their own currency that can be easily debased, right? And repeat the pattern that we see throughout history that's doomed to civilizations. And I mean, our holiest, most ancient texts will, warn us repeatedly: usury, riba, ribbit.
To your point, I mean, Bitcoin's been has been a socioeconomic experiment to some degree, and from your comments on like what you see on Twitter, like the squabbling and the noise, essentially all of the noise that's created based on what is at face value supposed to look like an opinion, is obviously actually agendas or series of agendas. It really, and I've always thought this to be true. It's Bitcoin's been a really interesting philosophical test into the psyche of human nature. Um, uh, the trustless aspect of it and the pseudo anonymity aspect of it, and well, we'll talk about the cryptography and the sustainability a little later. But go ahead.
But yeah, absolutely. And so, regardless of that, so I mean, BIP360 has probably gotten through like a number of changes, which are documented in the BIP itself over time. And over time, we've also added co-authors, Ethan Heilman and later on Isabel Fox and Duke. Ethan Heilman is a PhD cryptographer and he works for Cloudflare. And, Cloudflare, say what you will of them, they have utility, but they also centralize the internet. So like when Cloudflare has a bad day, everybody has a bad day, it seems, and that's a problem, considering that, the TCP/IP was originally introduced as like a way to sort of preserve like coordination in light of like some kind of a nuclear exchange, a strategic nuclear exchange. I think it was the original design from ARPANET, right? And so, like with those design, it made it was a distributed system that just did make a fundamental trust assumption on authorities, that authorities knew what they were doing, like the different regional NICs, I think they're called. They kind of like manage how BGP is routed and that sort of thing. And unfortunately, BGP was originally not even really authenticated. They didn't really have the cryptography for it when it was first introduced, because that wouldn't come until much later, right? Like RSA and ECC, that's 80s tech, right? And so it's kind of interesting how that evolved. And I mean, there's
70s in some cases.
Yeah, well, late 70s, like for example, like Leslie Lamport came with the Lamport. Yeah, Leslie Lamport. But I mean, that's at TCP/IP came early 70s. So, but regardless, yeah, you're right. And so, regardless, fascinating history there. It's worked pretty well so far, but there have been improvements to BGP authentication and security over time, which we've had to actually handle as potential threat models in Bitcoin Core. And so that's like some of those like really thorny networking issues. We've had to like kind of incorporate that also. Regardless, BIP360 came about because I. One of the principal reasons that I work in Bitcoin is I find it to be a really interesting challenge. Some of these protocol engineering problems are some of the toughest things I've ever looked at and touched, because not only is there a technical component that requires a lot of nuance and background and understanding and learning to address and work on to move the needle in any way, but also there's the social and economic reasoning behind it as well that you can't ignore. And so I love the framing of social, economic, and technical because it came from Fractal Encrypt. One of my favorite Bitcoin artists, Fractal Encrypt. He has an amazing piece of art that we have at the space that sort of, it's like this big clock, and it has like it's divided in 3 sections among many other things, but it just sort of underscores and hopefully drives home that the technical side is just one small part of Bitcoin governance and Bitcoin in general. Why people use it, and it's one of the coolest thing that I've ever had the opportunity to get to learn about, because and engage with, because essentially money touches all things, and if we invent a better money that is superior to basically all other money, then and it does get adopted, then the impact of that is so profound on a civilizational level. I mean, think of like what Gridless is doing in Africa in bootstrapping electrification of African villages so that, you know, African fathers can be better fathers to their children because they don't have to go, you know, 10 miles down the road to watch a football game. They can watch it there with their own kids. And there's just like an amazing humanitarian story behind Bitcoin that I find to be very inspiring. Alex Gladstein talks about this at length, and DS Batten, you know, Daniel Batten, he's done tireless work on addressing the ESG concerns around Bitcoin. And like the difference between FUD and a legitimate concern is just that there's a lot more narratives around the FUD that might be pushed, bandied about to like push some kind of one thing or another. But oftentimes there is like a kernel of truth. And, you know, with the ESG stuff, you know, it would suck if miners would be mining while people are freezing their own homes and sweltering in the Texas summer, right? That would be a shame, but they don't. And that's because Texas has a real-time pricing grid that basically reflects through free market dynamics the real cost of mining Bitcoin while people are suffering. And so the miners shut off, they take a day, you know, and they come back and you know, they secure the hash rate. And Bitcoin is anti-fragile, it is resilient against those sort of things. One of the cooler things that come out of that also is the heat punk movement, like with Tyler Stevens and others here at the space. We're actually going to be having a summit on that. I like the heat punk movement a lot because they're price insensitive. They're going to run their miners and secure Bitcoin with humble little ASICs. You don't need much. You don't need a huge ASIC. You don't need, certainly not an S19 to heat your water, right? And so yeah. Anyway,
I can tell that you're passionate.
Yeah, no, I mean
I'm actually using miners to heat part of my home as well too.
I do too. Yeah.
But sounds like I read BIP 360. I think it's probably the best proposal. We're going to talk. To me, it's a beginning. It's a beginning. It's a start.
It's a start.
It doesn't, you know, obviously it doesn't address what happens afterwards, but we're going to talk about that a little bit. Ryan, why don't you take us on to the next question?
Sure.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you giving that added context in both the personal part and then obviously the professional aspect. Next question. This one is, given that Bitcoin upgrades historically require broad global consensus over time horizons, how does the system realistically defend against an adversary whose capabilities may be cryptographically indistinguishable, unevenly disclosed, and potentially known only to a small set of highly resourced actors?
Yeah,
I'll probably start with this one.
Yeah,
I can probably start with this one. So in this case, I think the question is specifically around the quantum, the
CRQCs. If you don't mind, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to make sure that people understand. There's kind of like where we're at now is what we call a near-term intermediate scale quantum computer, an NISQ. These are not capable of running a non-trivial algorithm like Shor's yet. Once we do, then you enter the regime of the CRQC, the cryptoanalytically or cryptographically relevant quantum computer. And then finally, even further on along this, the fault-tolerant quantum computer that is essentially really no different than a classical computer. It just is capable of running even more things that sort of harness deeper physics of the universe.
So I can add that. I can add a response to that statement in my answer as well too. I see a lot of posts on Twitter about this current state of CRQCs, and one of the things that I think about is these are computers, and I've said this before. The audience in our community knows this. These are computers that are being developed under a veil of secrecy, right, by some of the smartest minds in the world, and I wouldn't be that. I've often compared this to a classification level as like the Manhattan Project. So there's this part of me that watches the companies, IBM, IonQ, whatever type of quantum computer that they're working on, report their progress, which they're in some cases obligated to do as publicly traded companies. But at the end of the day, if anyone, and this is my opinion, at the end of the day, I don't think anyone's actually able to truly report the progress on quantum computers, because if they were do so, they'd be essentially leaking classified information. There's a lot of evidence that, you know, the governments, different nation states are working on these machines in secret, and they would be foolish not to. So, regarding the question, how does a system realistically how do you defend against a quantum computer attack? Here's the problem. Here's one of the big problems. Under Satoshi Nakamoto's original white paper, and this original thesis, the ownership of the coin is only done cryptographically. It does not take into consideration anything other than you have the ability to make the transaction. Doesn't matter where the coins came from or whatever. So strictly, it's completely protocol based and mathematical based, and that's the ownership model. So strictly speaking, anything that based on the original Bitcoin ethos, any coin that CRQC concedes is technically owned by whoever it is that stole it. So we're also talking about, second point is, we're also talking about machines that by using Shores or some sort of derivative from Shores, being able to take a public key and make it a private key, and being able to intercept or rewrite a transaction or take funds from some of the earlier addresses in the blockchain. A lot of people talk about, well, we'll fork when it happens. Well, and even I think this was even referenced by Vitalik like a year or so ago. Well, if it were to happen, we'll roll back, and I think we'll talk on that a little bit more. But here's the thing that people don't really understand: if a CRQC were actually on the network and intercepting transactions, or essentially playing the role of a bad actor, you wouldn't even know about it. Its transactions would look cryptographically identical to a standard user's transactions. So an attack vector, think of the World War II Ultra program, where they were able to use the Enigma, they were able to break the Enigma machine and then essentially translate German communications. What they ended up doing was alerting just enough ships in order to return the most possible value, but not so much information that the German state at the time knew what had happened, knew that the system had been broken. I view that as a great historical analogy for how a Bitcoin, a CRQC attack might occur to Bitcoin, staying highly profitable but under the radar, and just basic game theory, trying to maximize your return. So evenly disclosed, intentionally, potentially known only to small.
Yeah, like a small set of highly resourced actors, and we can then let Hunter.
Originally, I don't think you would know.
Yeah. So what I mean, you have to. These are really heady philosophical waters in some ways, right? Because like and historically and all this. I mean, we learned about like that the Ultra program that you mentioned, and the Imitation Game, and which is the movie about Alan Turing, and how. They essentially sacrificed the lives of thousands of sailors in order to, and it's a very like British thing to do. I think it's kind of interesting. They did what they had to do, and it's undeniable that there's definitely spook involvement in cryptography. I mean, there's arguably no signature scheme gets published through NIST that doesn't also get approval and influence from the NSA. And we know that the NSA has had a history of kleptography, of essentially introducing backdoors through flawed encryption or cryptography that they tried to introduce.
But does that make it the cleanest dirty shirt?
That's
as far as choosing protocol. If you're going to find something,
well, that's
at the end of the day, who do you trust? I mean, you got to pick something.
So here's the thing. You have to look at first principles and incentives, right? So if the NSA were to try to publish a backdoor through pushing, see the problem that I have with Bitcoiners, having to explain to them, like that there was this, the NSA has spent billions on a program called Penetrating Hard Targets that was revealed by Snowden.
By Snowden, right?
Yeah, in 2013.
Yeah,
And
years ago.
yes. At the
It
time,
was
they were
revealed
spending.
then, but it had actually started years prior to that.
Oh yeah. So that was just one snapshot.
I just want to public.
Yeah, because like at the time they were spending $80 million a year. That year for that budget, and for specifically for funding the development of a computer that is capable of using quantum effects to break public key cryptography, and so specifically for breaking public key cryptography, and that they were working with defense contractors like Raytheon and Honeywell, who would later spin out their quantum unit as Quantinuum, and then they are also working with cryptographers from the University of Maryland. That's what we know from the leaks, and so also. Because that's just one snapshot, you know that they've spent billions by now, and it's also private investment in quantum stuff, quantum computing startups and stuff like IonQ, Rigetti, and PsiQuantum. They all. I mean, it's in probably come to the tens of billions or on that order by now. These machines are not cheap to develop. They cost billions of dollars to construct and millions of dollars to run. They run 2 cryogenic coolants, liquid helium, liquid nitrogen. The PLA has probably maybe an equivalent amount of investment. So the NSA and the PLA are both at play, and so we have like Chinese adversaries that want to break cryptography, and then we have domestic deep state adversaries, and then I have to go to Bitcoiners and explain to them, like, these spooks are making a threat that breaks the cryptography that secures Bitcoin, and then also they're recommending cryptography that we replace it with. And obviously, we can't just cargo cult what comes out of NIST. We have to understand it really well. And we have actually devoted a significant number of resources on my team to understanding hash-based cryptography approaches like SLH-DSA, which are arguably the more conservative, very conservative approaches to solving this problem with a stateless hash signature algorithm, which may be overkill. But the thing is, nothing right now is really particularly adequate for a drop-in replacement for all that we get from Schnorr signatures. And we have efficient threshold signatures. It's amazing, right? They're very, very compact, very cheap to verify, and we can do a heck of a lot with them. And for us to lose that in a post-quantum regime would be devastating, and we need better solutions. Nothing's perfect right now, and so we've really scoped back BIP360 to just only define a small tweak that makes Bitcoin more quantum resistant by essentially removing the elliptic curve component of taproot address generation.
It sounds easy.
Well, yeah. It sounds easy because easy. We're removing functionality that currently exists, and we're
going to circle back to that,
and just calling it instead of version 1, we're calling it version 2, and so we don't want to disable anything that anybody's currently using. We're just making a new thing people can opt into that is more resistant to a long exposure attack, and we can get into that distinction in the future.
So a couple thoughts on that one, Ryan, and well get to the next question in a sec. I'm just assuming right now that Bitcoin is going to be able to implement a post-quantum secure DSA, okay, be it pay to taproot or pay to quantum resistant hash or whatever. Let's just say that all goes to plan, and users are migrating over. They're taking their legacy transactional Bitcoin and migrating to the post-quantum secure addressing. So you have essentially this period of time in which you need to be able to give the users to be able to migrate, and this is only an opt-in. This can't be done automatically because Bitcoin doesn't have a procedure for this. There was a paper too mentions that it would take about 76 days of downtime. I don't see it quite as downtime. I see it as time interlaced with other transactions, but that's besides the point. To me, just assuming all of that works, let's just skip ahead. We'll call it 5 years. 5 years. Okay. Now you have users migrating. Okay. What do you do with the old DSAs do you go? I see three options. If you go freeze camp and deprecate the old DSAs, you compromise property ownership from the original Bitcoin white paper, and you break its philosophy in
the social contract,
not just a subtle way, in a definite, meaningful, thesis breaking way. If you go no freeze camp, then you're essentially creating a value disparity between post-quantum secure Bitcoin and classically secure Bitcoin. And that breaks fungibility in that one Bitcoin should be worth one Bitcoin. There shouldn't be different security qualifiers on what makes it secure and what makes it not. So there's multiple other reasons. I have a list of like 3 or 4 other things, but in the interest of time, and the other option I see is hard forks. Hard forks are valid under consensus, Nakamoto consensus.
Yeah, let's get into this next question because this ties to, as Hunter mentioned a few minutes ago, hey, this is the conversation around Bitcoin and is not just technical. That's obviously the social aspect, the economic aspect. The question is, if post-quantum changes fail to reach consensus, how many economically and socially relevant forks of Bitcoin could plausibly emerge? And this is a pretty open-ended question.
And that was right where I was at, Ryan, in explaining. I think you picked that up.
Let me know if you need me to read that one again, Hunter.
No, I got it.
Go ahead, Hunter.
Let me just adjust the point of Nakamoto consensus. So Nakamoto consensus is the chain with the most work wins, right? And so there can only be one chain that has the most work, like by definition, right? And that would be the ones that are that the majority of the existing miners are mining against and securing, and they're doing that because they know that the Bitcoin they're mining is valuable and will remain valuable.
This is where you start to split hairs on the philosophy. Is Bitcoin Cash a valid fork?
I like a lot of what they're doing. I respect their philosophy, and I understand where they're coming from. For example, Javon's paradox is kind of an interesting way to think of fee revenue and how if you have if it becomes cheaper to transact in Bitcoin, then more people will adopt it. And so I don't want to discount their efforts entirely. But that said, I think hard forks remain a useful distinction for the because essentially an affinity scam and a hard fork is indistinguishable. A soft fork that fails to gain enough support becomes a de facto hard fork as well. And so and also in just the ordinary operation of the protocol with orphan blocks, they happen. Those are essentially forked off and discarded.
This is within context of CRQCs, right?
Well, in the broader context of CRQCs, it's a little bit different.
That's where I want to stay the context.
Yeah. Here. Okay. Yeah. So I think it's important that we work within the BIPS process and do a soft fork. There aren't hard forks unless we've exhausted all other options.
Let's just assume all that works. Honestly, that's being that you've got a good proposal out there. Let's give Bitcoin the best possible case for its continuance, and let's just assume the DSA is in and it works and people are migrating. One of the things I was saying was there's freeze camp, no freeze camp, and forks.
Yes.
Freeze camp breaks Bitcoin consensus. No freeze camp does not technically break, but it leaves it open to a CRQC. Blockchain does not technically break Bitcoin Nakamoto consensus. So those are the 3 options. Do you see another option? Do you think one of those is more likely?
Well, I think of the third option as sort of like a proposal like Hourglass that would impose a consensus limit that would reduce the spends of specific types of quantum vulnerable coins. Pay to public key, I think, is I would never want to confiscate from owners who haven't moved their coins but find their keys eventually. But that said, we must also acknowledge the risk that poses to the network from a crypto economic incentive. Because the thing is, proof of work, a 51% attack, and all this, like all of that is predicated on the basically the assumption that Bitcoin miners will secure Bitcoin because it is valuable, and if the value is compromised extrinsically, that could potentially pose an existential threat to the network. That said, heat punks help push back against this a little bit. There's always going to be some guy with a solo miner or like a water heater running SHA-260, and they'll be price insensitive. Yeah, and that said, and so that's why I'm very encouraging of it. I find that movement to be very encouraging, and I think that's one way that will help Bitcoin win. Now, as far as like throttling spends like a P2PK, that I think that's okay. And the thing I would point to is
isn't that starting to create preferential treatment there? I mean, the core ethos is behind is that everyone is treated the same. Everyone's Bitcoin is fungible. That it doesn't care whether you're tall, short, white, black, what religion you are, affluent or not. So you already, it feels like a gate, like a pre-qualifier for slowly marginalizing or compromising the ethos of Bitcoin. And back to your earlier,
I would generally. So by the way, this is kind of like a philosophical point, right?
And that's how money started. That's actually how the Fed started. We could tie that in. Let's save that for another episode.
What I will say is that the vast majority of these P2PK coins came from a time, decades ago, over 10 years. And I think it's we have to be careful and point out that originally, when Bitcoin originally was developed, the original client, Satoshi made a fateful decision. Even though hashed keys were included in that client, he didn't make the original block rewards default go to
but it's not just his too.
Well, so there's 1.7 million P2PK coins, and they're spread out across roughly 34,000 distinct keys, and those are public keys that have been available for a very long time, and they have an average balance of 50 Bitcoin each, which was the original block reward. I think it's important to just point out that Satoshi could have kept those coins secure against quantum computers, but he didn't. And he also seemed to be kind of aware of the problem that posed. I mean, it was certainly aware. Cryptographers were certainly aware. Post 2000, and so it could have been Satoshi's intention. That could have been an intentional design decision to sort of free up original coins that could have been abandoned or lost and returned to supply and circulation, to kind of reinforce the original social contract most Bitcoiners agreed to, which is the 21 million hard supply cap. It's not 21 million minus some subset of like coins that we would prefer to freeze. I think that's definitely a problem. And so regardless, if we're sticking to just like the fundamental problem that quantum computers could pose, we have to be very careful to not be hasty, and but we also have to be diligent and prudent and evaluate this problem in a sober and conservative and thread the needle, essentially. That's what I call threading the needle.
So don't be hasty, but be diligent and don't argue about it.
Well, we can argue. I mean, that's tradition, right? Yeah.
Argue productively, or
I want to move into a question. I'm going to slightly reframe this one a little bit.
It's a difficult question. I mean, I'm not countering it, but these are the questions. These are what one of the reasons I work at the QRL. These problems are I can't ignore them. And they are real, but Ryan.
Yeah, no, what I'd like to get Hunter's take on is a lot of people, whether we're talking, Bitcoin maxis or fill in the blank, they believe that, a sufficiently cryptographically relevant quantum computer doesn't pose a practical threat to Bitcoin, now or even in like 10 or 15 years. I'd be curious to know, obviously, you're someone in the space, Bitcoin developer that's trying to, come to the best solution. We're obviously in the space too, on the post-quantum side. And so I'd be curious to know what's something that you would tell people that are of the camp of, this isn't something to worry about. What do you think is a belief that, or something that you think is, underestimated in terms of how they're looking at?
I'm going to give a 15-second answer, and then I'm going to let Hunter give his 5-minute answer.
Okay, that works fine.
Okay? That seems fair.
That's cool. Hunter, that's good with me.
If whether or not you believe in CRQCs or even quantum computing, or whether or not you think they're real or they're unicorns, it doesn't matter. All of the cryptographic standards worldwide are already migrating. Corporations will follow government standards, and retail open source will eventually have to do the same. So whether we're past that point, these are governmental mandates, including the United States and the federal quantum initiative, I think it was called. So to me, that question is in a way voided. You wouldn't even know that a CRQC was on the chain stealing transactions. You wouldn't even know, because cryptographically it looks the same. Aligning those 2 points together means it's just a problem you can't ignore. But Hunter, take it away.
Okay, so what I can say is that the intellectually honest answer to that question is that quantum computers either could already exist, they're being kept secret, or also it goes from that to we might not ever be capable of solving this monumentally complex physics and engineering problem.
It doesn't matter. Does that matter?
That doesn't, because as you rightly point out, not only are governments making regulations around this, and governments the thing the Bitcoiners like to say is that Bitcoin is for enemies. It's for everyone, and so including the people you don't like. And for nation state adoption is inevitable. Corporations that comply with nation state regulations, those we'd want everybody to adopt Bitcoin. And so I think that's
even with a small risk, the loss potential is just too high.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I don't know. Have you ever heard of 10th man rule? It's actually
I've heard that in the context of like people who are contrary. Like,
it wasn't a Brad Pitt movie, they brought it up, but essentially, if the destruction is great, or the potential for its destruction is great, but the probability is only 1 or 2% or relatively small, you must look into it and take it seriously.
Yeah.
Because law of probability over infinite time, just have 50 of those circumstances, one of them's going to happen.
It ties into like kind of like a Pascal's wager type situation, right? Like Pascal's wager was like, if there is a God, it's better bet to kind of make your peace.
Seems like the cost of entry is pretty low. So
exactly, and the potential for eternity and damnation is
that's a spiritual approach. I gave a movie approach. You gave us. This is fun.
Yeah. And so, regardless, the fear exists in the markets. Markets are a part of Bitcoin's security model, and so because of the cryptoeconomic security of proof of work, and so it's important to address the concern and make sure that people have the proper context for how things are developing, and not make decisions that are too irrational.
How do you address the concern?
Well, we talk about it, we investigate it, we research it, we write a BIP, we may even introduce.
How does it end?
How does it end?
I don't see a way in which it. This is my opinion. I don't see a way in which it ends without either breaking the tech, doing forks, or breaking some sort of core Nakamoto consensus philosophy.
Well, in that case, I'll just point you to the anthropic principle, in that like we can't really the parameters for our existence in the universe, the physical constants, right? That led to our capability to observe those constants and measure them and marvel at the cosmos.
And the only reason we can do that is because we're here to observe.
We're here to observe them.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, let's go to the next one, because I think this kind of just keeps segueing a little bit.
Yeah, we might have to do a second episode, Ryan.
No, we definitely are, because there's a lot of good questions, and each of these ones
I'm looking at Hunter. He looks like he's holding
this would
back
be interesting to
quite a
chat with Hunter. Hunter, we'll do this one. At what point does an opt-in to in post-quantum migration stop becoming voluntary, and it becomes economically or socially coercive through fees, policies, or ecosystem behavior? What's your take on this one?
I think we could come up with technical solutions for all of these things that are good enough. Bitcoin doesn't have to be perfect. We just have to have good enough solutions that have rough consensus, and that we can maybe activate with 95% of the hash rate over a 2-week activation period, or whatever. However we want to do BIP9 activation, and if BIP9 activation fails, there's always BIP8. And so there's a number of different approaches and ways that we can try to thread the needle. We haven't exhausted nearly. This is a vast problem space, and it's like Hilbert space. It's vast. Like we could choose any, and the likelihood that we are able to solve this problem in a satisfactory way is, I will acknowledge, vanishingly small. Like the probability that we don't wind up, the probability that we wind up with, that we make a bad decision and we break Bitcoin forever, and we just end this experiment because of other extrinsic factors that are really kind of no fault of our own, the probability is actually quite high. And that said, also the probability that this universe is uninhabitable is also quite high, so it's just I sort of have faith that we are living in a universe in which it optimizes for the optimal outcome. And this is Thomas Campbell. He's written about this in My Big Toe, My Big Theory of Everything. He's a consciousness researcher and NASA scientist, and he basically says, like the whole, we're probably not living in base reality. There's probably some kind of larger consciousness system that all consciousness emerges from. There's probably some kind of database that we're all kind of running on, and we're not aware of it because we're not. And maybe that's one reason why quantum computers seem so effective, is because the way we do computation now is probably closer to like the Redstone computers of Minecraft, and quantum computers are just capable of running assembly on the CPU of the base reality, and that's why they seem more efficient.
Ryan, before we go down the path of objective deterministic reality, or probabilistic reality, and or simulation theory, take us to the next question.
Yeah, no, I think I think we got just a couple more. I think definitely upcoming in the next couple weeks or months, it'd be awesome to do a part 2, because I think we have a number of really good questions that we could jump into. Everything from rollbacks to what some of the trade-offs as we go. But I think one with the current times in early 2026. Yeah, no, I think
let me bring them up.
This is more just a general one. I'm just kind of curious. We're early in 2026. The excitement around post-quantum security in general, of Coinbase forming an independent advisory team, the Ethereum Foundation saying Ethereum is for quantum resistance, and I think that's just everyone's jumping onto that bandwagon that maybe hasn't otherwise. So my question is just more of a general. In the blockchain industry, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm going to give I'm going to try and give a 15-second answer again, because there's already a lot of, I've covered this on Twitter quite a bit. One of the things I think we need to do, if we want to reduce the noise floor, is define exactly what a post-quantum secure blockchain is. Does that mean it's consensus protocol? Does that mean it's, in my opinion, it should mean it's bridging layer? What is it bridging to? What is the scope of post-quantum security? I think that term I see that term gratuitously, maybe, is the word I would pick. And, but that, I've already talked about this a lot. Hunter, give us your take.
The reality is that we're going to need all the tools in our toolbox. And so I think, so long as it's NIST 1, I think that's good enough. But regardless, when it comes to coming up with good solutions for solving this problem, I think bridges will help, sidechains will help. That's one of the reasons why I threw in with Mara was not because they pay well. In fact, I probably could earn more money doing something else. But regardless, they are they represent 5% of the hash rate. They run a private mempool that they keep secure and locked down. They do have a way for transaction submission that is also very closely validated and checked, and very difficult to. We have lots of checks against Slipstream for people trying to introduce attack transactions, attack blocks, and that sort of thing. But I think Slipstream and things like it will be necessary for those who need to migrate their coins without revealing their public keys until the block is published. And
let me ask you this: if you were to build HunterBeastCoin today, would you make it post-quantum secure since the first block?
Wow. I would never want to try to create a money that tried to be better than Bitcoin.
It's not a money. It just that well, it would be.
I immediately my marketing self went to what are we going to name this?
Removing the counterfeit qualifier and any oppositional opinions from the Fed. If you were just to create one for strictly utilitarian purposes, it just solves a utilitarian problem. Would you make it post quantum secure since the first block, or what would you do?
What I would do if I thought that I had a solution for better security is I would peg it to the value of Bitcoin 1-to-1 using a quantum resistant bridge. And I would build a quantum resistant bridge and I would put a sidechain on it. And that would be one way to scale and field post-quantum.
It would take you 5 years to get a quantum resistant bridge put into Bitcoin.
Well, I've been working on this very problem at Mara for since December 18th, 2020.
I'd love to see I'd love to see a QR bridge. Mm-hmm. That'd make our job a lot easier.
It's definitely.
Then we could just add in a DSA and we're full ecosystem, baby.
Yeah. So and I would be happy to have those conversations. That we've already been talking to some people who are wanting to do a Bitcoin quantum resistant sidechain as well. And I mean, I also talked to Abelian and all these other people, and like I would love to see a QR, like more the merrier. But so long as the base token is pegged to Bitcoin 1-to-1.
But you'd still have to upgrade the Bitcoin the Bitcoin.
No, actually, no, you don't. So you can,
really?
You can just you can mitigate against these. And I'd love to explain our approach for building the Andro quantum resistant bridge.
It would solve the bridging problem, and how if you're truly a post quantum secure. Truly, in my view, what post quantum secure, including the transaction, not just the consensus. It does open up the ecosystem, whereas otherwise you are quite a bit isolated.
Essential for the design of a quantum resistant bridge is you need the private transaction submission to the mempool, and 5% hash rate is sufficient for probably finding out one block a day, and so that's important. There's other factors though, like orphaned blocks, because what could happen is that a block is orphaned and the keys are exposed, but that we're not building on that block anymore, and so in that case we need a strategy to kind of and then the two transactions that are types that are important in a bridging is consolidation of peg ins and of course peg outs, and so both those transaction types can be submitted privately without revealing the public keys, so long as you use pay to witness script hash. And so pay to witness script hash is nice because it's hashed, and then you can then add more public keys to make yourself a harder target. We're planning on at full deployment of the Federation. We plan to have a 13 of 15 pay to witness script hash multi-sig. That they would need to break 13 keys within the span of 10 minutes or whatever. We'd obviously set a much higher fee rate if the block was orphaned, and that that block would get those transactions would be secured.
That's interesting. I think as a closeout, definitely going to have a part two and jump into a lot more of these questions in terms of where the puck is going of post quantum with how Bitcoin is handling it and where the space is going. I'd love to wrap up this first episode with where's a good place for those in our audience that aren't already familiar with you. Where should they follow you? We'll drop in the show notes links to BIP360, but where's the best place or two for our audience to follow you on social or anywhere else?
Yeah, definitely. So you can read more about BIP360 at BIP360.org. And we also have a Substack that I curate and publish my own thinking on. That's cryptoquick.substack.com. And then you can also find me on X at cryptoquick. And although I like Nostr, I kind of sort of avoid it for purposes of discussions around like this, especially this topic, because all Nostr identities, unfortunately, are public keys. And so,
yeah. Well, we'll point people to those three. We'll put links to those couple in the show notes to make easy reference for those watching it, and have the handle in there as well. So, Hunter, we appreciate the first part of this conversation. I'm sure it will continue, and it's nice to have you on with us and be able to have an in-person digital conversation with you. And for those watching, I hope you appreciated this episode. And until the next episode, keep those digital assets post-quantum secure.